Welcome in, Who Dat Nation. Hopefully you're having a fantastic time. Hopefully you're having a great Tuesday, because that's when we're recording this live. If you haven't, if you're catching this on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, iHeart Radio, etc., we do this show live. At least the live folks get the first shot at it and everything. Tuesdays and Thursdays, as well as following every game. You can also catch us on YouTube. So join in. Who Dat to you. Today we're going to talk about some topics. AC joint sprain for Derek Carr. We're going to talk about Doug Marrone a bit, because at 3 games in, I think we need to talk about Doug Marrone. And we're going to talk about a little bit of everything, as well as where the New Orleans Saints are and where the NFC South is as a whole, which as a Saints fan, you should be at least positive, right? I mean, it's very difficult to go through. We don't know how much time Derek Carr is going to miss. If he technically misses time at all, I'm not personally holding out that there's going to be no time lost here, but you do have the NFC South with 3 teams with positive records. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers lost last night to the Philadelphia Eagles, but they're still 2-1. New Orleans obviously 2-1, and Atlanta 2-1. Carolina not having won a game. And for a division that's supposedly weak, the only other division in the NFC that has 3 teams that are in a positive record is the NFC East, with the Philadelphia Eagles. Obviously, they're a team that's gone to the Super Bowl here recently. The Washington Commanders, Dallas Cowboys, and then New York is 1-2. And then if you flip over to the AFC side of the ball, only one division has got 3 teams with a positive record. And that's the AFC North, with Cleveland, Pittsburgh, and Baltimore. And Cincy, of course, is 1-2, trying to recover from their really slow start, but they've got Joe Burrow, which I think every Saints fan, if you ask them right now, I bet most Saints fans would say, I'd rather be 1-2 with Joe Burrow than 2-1 with an injured starting quarterback. So we'll see how that plays out. Who Dat to those who are here early on, appreciate you. Hope y'all been enjoying the film studies. I know coming off for a loss, film studies aren't usually as enjoyable. And the one that I put out yesterday on Ryan Ramczyk certainly wasn't a positive film study. And I know we prefer positive content. Hopefully we get back in the win column this week, and also still got to do a film study for tomorrow. But who Dat to Lester, Nikki DeFish, Bim, DJ Twigger, Be Kind, Rainey, The Antonio, TJ, one of our moderators. Good to see him. Crass, T5 to Great, Mr. Jerry, John Searing, Randall, Ant the Bug Catcher, which is a little bit of irony there. K. Moyel, Lorenzo, James Griffon, 992, Rass, Peyton A. Bear, Slade Smith, K-Man, everybody. Who Dat to you. Welcome on in. So today, I'm going to go ahead and warn you, just talked about yesterday's being a little bit negative. Today is going to be a smidge negative as well, because I've been talking about this. I was actually talking to Nick Underhill about this earlier, and there is a really serious issue with the New Orleans Saints offensive line. And I think to be objective, we have to then try to identify what is the issue. Now, I'm going to roll out some things, and I'll ask you that you hold judgment on what I'm about to say. But Eric McCoy, 2nd-round pick, has a 5-year contract. When he signed, it was worth about $60 million. Ryan Ramczyk, obviously a first-rounder from 2017. He signed a 5-year right at $100 million deal. Cesar Ruiz is a first-round pick, has a 4-year, $40 million that he just signed. Obviously, got taken out of this most recent game with concussion, but, just pointing it out. Andres Pete, who ended up playing, is a first-rounder from a long time ago, but his contract is still 5 for $57. And then you got Trevor Penning, a first-rounder. All right, so you're talking about an offensive line that is full of talent. Now, talent does not always necessarily translate to effective play on the field, but there's a reason that I just named off 4 first-rounders and a second-rounder. And I do realize that Andres Pete's a little bit on the fringe, so if we want to cut him off of that conversation, that's fine. 3 and 1. You have a very talented, very physically capable set of players, yet the New Orleans Saints right now, we're just hitting you with numbers. We're not trying to say this team is secretly good, but just talking numbers. The New Orleans Saints have given up like the 5th most sacks in the NFL. Now, I'm not trying to argue that everything is trash, because I do think a lot of the things that we've seen can get better. But right now, Derek Carr been sacked 11 times. Obviously, there were more sacks given up in this recent game, but the Commanders have given up 19 sacks. And then if you look at who's left, it's Chicago, Tennessee, Washington, and then New Orleans for most sacks given up in the league. And I say all this to lead up to this statement. We're talking about a bunch of first-round picks. Talent seems to be there. We know that there's been proven production because a lot of these guys have gotten big contracts, or at least big-ish contracts, and yet they are a bottom 5 offensive line and pass protection around the league. And when it comes to the running game, they're not exactly much better either. When do we point the problem at coaching? When we look at a team looking bad, look, I think Ryan Ramczyk lost some one-on-ones, right? And I think that's fine. That's going to happen. I do want to see him get better. And I'm not trying to take away any blame from him. I think I put plenty of that in there in yesterday's video. So if you haven't checked out the film study and you're listening to the podcast, please check out the Who Dat Confessional YouTube channel. We put out the Saints Film Room. We've been putting out consistently for about, 4 weeks now, chat? At least 1 to 2 film studies, shooting for 3 a week. So we certainly see Ryan Ramczyk losing, but you know what? It's not like he's complete trash. But I also have to then question the current offensive coaching. Because here's the thing. 3 years ago, this offensive line was mostly the same in terms of people. You had Cesar Ruiz as a rookie who had not reached the level that he is now. Cesar Ruiz was the worst offensive lineman on your team 3 years ago. And yet, under Dan Roushar, this was a top 5, top 10 at worst offensive line. Now, yes, Andres Pete has degraded more and more as years have gone on and more injuries have piled up. Cool. And I realized there was Teron Armstead on that team. But when I watch the film, I'm seeing a fundamentally bad performing offensive line. They're struggling with twists and stunts up front. You can't tell me that Eric McCoy struggles with that because he's excelled with it on film for years. So just unless Eric McCoy decided to start jumping off buildings and hitting himself with bricks, I really struggle to believe that all of a sudden the interior can't pick up twists and stunts. When I look at some of the slide protections, 5-0s, all these calls that New Orleans runs, they're just not performing well as a unit. And when there is a problem with the unit versus an individual player, I go to coaching. Doug Marrone has been the coach for the Saints offensive line here for going on his 2nd year. And you go before that, it was Brendan Nugent. You go before that, it was Dan Roushar. Go before that was Brett Ingles. And no matter who the offensive line coach has been, really for the past decade and a half, you've had good offensive line play. Things have changed, here and there. And that happens, right? Like you're going to have some turnover. Sometimes guys get promoted, whatever. You talk about Dan Roushar. He is currently with the Tulane team, college football team. So that's where he's currently sitting at as a coach because the New Orleans Saints let him go. He had been promoted to the run game coordinator and tight ends coach last year. So for those that don't, 2 years ago. For those that don't remember, Dan Roushar was our offensive line coach from 2016 to 2020. I would argue that in those years, the New Orleans Saints offensive line was one of the best performing offensive lines in the league in that time period. Then in 2020, in Sean Payton's last year, he is promoted to run game coordinator and becomes the tight end coach because Dan Campbell leaves and goes to Detroit. Shout out Dan Campbell. Very happy for you. Good luck to the Detroit Lions. Now, he's been let go as of this past offseason. They let him go completely, and now Doug Marrone has complete control over that area in that room. And we have seen just a complete spiral as a unit. Now, it's only 3 games, so things can always recover. But when you're talking about a group that has been known for 10 plus years to be an effective, solid, very good offensive line, why out of nowhere has that now become a bottom 5 unit? We're talking about crazy turnover, y'all. I mean, remember when we talk about the Saints offense and defense getting better or worse, etc., and that's a real thing? Well, we've also had some drastic flips, right? An example of a drastic flip would be like the 2016 Saints defense going to the 2017 Saints defense. So 2016 was the first year that Dennis Allen had full control, and you could tell that it had gotten better, but it still wasn't great. And then you get to the next season, you're like, oh, whoa. Top 10 points allowed defense. This is new. You went from the 31st points allowed defense to the 10th. It was a massive flip on its head because of coaching. And now we've seen the reverse happen with the offensive line, where we talked about them for a long time being one of the best. Didn't matter who the quarterback was, by the way. I'm not just trying to say that Drew Brees didn't have an effect there. Drew Brees being a Hall of Fame quarterback certainly helps out your offensive line. But when it came to Andy Dalton, Trevor Siemian, Jameis Winston, yeah, I mean, there was some pass rush there, and there is a lower level of quarterback play, which can lead to sacks. But we're seeing this year more than just, hey, a sack happened, or more than just, hey, this guy's getting consistently beat. We're seeing the group continue to fail. And then you get into the Alabama football fan base, and they'll tell you, hands down, bar none, Doug Marrone made that offensive line in Alabama worse. Now, I am not trying to just say that Doug Marrone is a trash coach, because I'll put it this way, and I say this about Tre'Quan Smith, who got released today. I know a lot of Saints fans are kind of celebrating about that. Doug Marrone knows more about football than everybody currently in my live stream and myself combined right now. And that's just a fact. So I don't want to talk super negative about a man who, if he offered to come on the show and teach us O-line play, we would all be jumping up and down. Yes, please come talk offensive line on the Saints film room. But at the same time, you're seeing a unit go from being a top unit to even a mid-tier unit to the absolute bottom. And that is a problem. And the only thing I can really say to Saints fans is, like, what would you do in this situation? I don't know. Like, I hate to be the guy that's bringing up a problem and not providing an answer. But what I am trying to do is transition from us talking about the problem being the offensive line individuals, like, oh, Trevor Penning really struggling at left tackle. Oh, we've got James Hurst, Andres Pete, etc. Oh, what Ryan Ramczyk loses. At what point does it become everybody? Now, the only person on the roster who could potentially come and step in for this would be Jari Evans. It's the only person. I'll be very clear. I don't know if Jari Evans is ready for that step. And that's not meant to be offensive to Jari. I 100% stand on the fact that the man is a Hall of Famer, or will be a Hall of Famer. He deserves a gold jacket. And I want to see him progress as a coach. 1,000%, right? But at the same time, I don't know if he's ready to be an offensive line coach. I mean, because it's only his first year actually on a full-term staff. Last year, he was like a helper that was brought in, and he's working his way into coaching. But at the same time, I know I'm kind of flipping on points here, but Doug Marrone is currently leading one of the worst offensive lines in the NFL, and there's just absolutely no way you can personally convince me. Maybe I am blinded. Maybe I need to get back in the film room, but you simply cannot convince me that a team that has invested this heavily in offensive line is supposed to be a bottom 5 team. You just can't. I refuse to believe that Ryan Ramczyk has already hit his sell-by date. I refuse to believe that Eric McCoy has hit his sell-by date. I've watched Eric McCoy go toe-to-toe with Vita Vea and stonewall him. I watched in the Titans game a pretty good job by Ruiz to do the same thing to guys like Tart, who are over here just wrecking havoc across the league through 3 weeks. So I know that the one-on-one ability is there. But when it comes to the group cohesion, that is clearly not there. There's a reason that Green Bay is lining up with 5s through 9s, completely ignoring the middle, throwing a twist in the middle, and then relying on Ryan Ramczyk to get beat on the outside. And, oh, by the way, I'm currently describing the play that Derek Carr gets injured and has that AC joint sprain. That sounds like a group problem, and when there's a group problem, there is a coaching problem. It's the same thing I did last year, and I have to be fair, right? I went at Pete Carmichael because, look, I agree. Andy Dalton / hurt Jameis Winston was certainly not the vibe. But at the same time, there are missed opportunities. And when you have guys calling out your plays on you on the defense side of the ball and you're not changing them, that's a problem. But when you go in 3 weeks with an offensive line that has more money and more talent invested into it than any positional group on the team, the only positional group that you can argue that has the same level of talent and money input into it is maybe wide receiver, right? Maybe. Because the corners, as much as I love the corners, the only first rounder is Marrone. Right? At least with the wide receiver argument, you got a lot of talent invested in there. And so I'll take that as a possible. But you have way too much talent and way too much money invested in that offensive line for them to be playing bottom 5. And in a recent presser, Dennis Allen kind of alluded to this being an issue with coaching. I just don't feel like he went in hard enough. And if you're a Jameis fan, you're welcome on the show, by the way. If you're a Derek Carr fan, you're welcome on the show, by the way. I don't care which quarterback you want. Because I'm watching Saints Twitter argue over how Jameis Winston is secretly the greatest quarterback of all time and Carr sucks, or literally the reverse of that, because that's just the platform people use now. It's either this guy is literally the best to ever do it and this guy's the worst, or vice versa. I don't care who you want to be the quarterback of the New Orleans Saints. I don't care if you want Drew Brees to come out of retirement. The way this offensive line playing right now is absolute garbage, and it doesn't matter who the quarterback is because they're going to get hurt. And I don't make jokes about quarterbacks getting hurt. And I know, social media I don't even think they were joking. Talking about, look, if the Saints offensive line keeps like this, Derek Carr is going to get hurt. And lo and behold, he got hurt. So the New Orleans Saints have got to do something. besides the Derek Carr injury and figuring out the game plan for Tampa, which we'll cover that on Thursday's episode, this New Orleans Saints squad has got to figure out how to fix the offensive line's problems. And it's not just something as simple as getting chips on the edge to help out a growing Trevor Penning, who, by the way, has gotten better. And yes, they were still chipping to help him and stuff in this game. But if you go back and watch, I didn't include this play because we weren't focusing on Trevor Penning. But if you go back and watch the play where Jameis Winston gets sacked, you'll notice that Trevor Penning is using a fantastic snatch technique, which is actually something that you should see from Teron Armstead all the time. So seeing that in game 3 is a positive, even though he's still getting beat and there's still some things that need to get better. At least seeing a little bit of improvement. But as a unit, this offensive line is playing terrible, and that has got to change. Derek Carr, in my opinion, is the best quarterback this team could possibly have right now. It doesn't really matter if he can't throw the football. You know, Jameis Winston is a guy who I do think never got a good shot last year because of situations, circumstances, etc. He's not going to do well behind this offensive line. New Orleans has a major problem along the front, and that has to get addressed sooner rather than later. But that's not the only topic I want to talk about tonight. I do have to bring up Tre'Quan Smith has been released. I'm very curious, and every Saints guy has said the same thing. I'm very curious if Sean Payton goes for a grab and tries to pick him up now that the New Orleans Saints have let him go. Now, the Denver Broncos are currently the worst team in the NFL at 0-3. I know people love to hate on Sean Payton right now because he did some really shady stuff that got him kicked out, but that is by far the worst defense in the NFL, and it's not even close. Like, y'all can hate on Sean Payton all you want. That is the worst defense in the NFL. And to make a point, they've given up 122 points. 122 points. Through 3 games, y'all. You're giving up 40 points a game as a defense? Holy crap. Like, we got to get the bleep button out here. Like, this is radio. Holy shit. That is insane. Now, a 70-point debut by the best offense in the league with Miami will do that, but it doesn't matter. You still take that 70 away. You're still giving up like 26 a game. Holy shit. Calm it down. Calm it down. So, maybe we'll see Tre'Quan head over there and help out Russell Wilson. Sean Payton has completely turned around that offense because that was the worst scoring offense in the NFL last year, the Broncos, and now they're 15th. So that's a damn good turnaround. It just happened to come with the defense doing the same damn thing because last year the defense for the Broncos was the 14th best defense in points allowed, and now they're the 32nd. So Sean, I guess, is going to go out with a blaze of offense as always and lose with defense. Seems very, very familiar. But yeah, Tre'Quan Smith got released. I do think that Tre'Quan got a lot of gruff in his, 5 years here in New Orleans, but he contributed pretty well. Give him credit to that. And once a Saint, always a Saint. I wish him the best, and I hope things go well for him in the future. But yeah, unless Tre'Quan can cover, I don't really see it helping too much different. But anyway, we'll see what he ends up doing. Tre'Quan, for those who are curious, he did finish his career with New Orleans with 131 receptions, 1,764 yards. That's 13.5 yards per reception. 18 touchdowns, 94 first downs. And if you're into Pro Football Reference's approximate value metric, which is what they use to just kind of value what everybody is worth to their team in any given year, he finished with 16, which is a respectable amount. I mean, he is, for a lot of people, an underperforming guy. He was a third-round pick right at pick 90 and never panned out into reaching the potential a lot of us saw. I remember Mike Detillier had a fantastic write-up of him when he was coming out of UCF and coming into the league, and you talked about his ability to high point the ball coming out and how well he looked in those 7 through 9 routes, and that just never really, panned out. Originally, just going back in a little memory lane for y'all, especially for newer Saints fans who maybe didn't remember this or know this, this was a guy that was drafted to be the replacement for Ted Ginn Jr. at the flanker spot, and it just never ended up happening. So, it's wish him the best. And hey, if he ends up retiring, maybe I can get him to come on the podcast. Who knows? Who knows? I've been reaching out to some former players, see if any of them are interested, but we'll see. No guarantees, because I'm not really inviting them to the podcast. I'm inviting them to the Saints film room, sit down, and yeah, I'm trying to step up my game. No guarantees, y'all. I gotta remember, I've been out of this. I've been out of this for a couple years, so I'm trying to work my way back in. Now, Philip says he'll need Tre'Quan put on the O-line. He'll do a better job than the guys there. Maybe we should have kept him, Philip. I mean, if we slid him in and instead of James Hurst, maybe we'd be doing better. Maybe we'll be doing better. Kimber says, wonder why Thomas wanted Carr and AKB non-existent when Winston playing. They don't want him as the dang QB. They know better than us. Look, I'm not here to take shots at Jameis Winston. I will say this, though. The team definitely, everybody top to bottom on the roster loves Jameis Winston and would rather Derek Carr be starting. And both are equally true. Both are equally true. You know, I think that it's absolutely fantastic to have a quarterback of Jameis Winston's caliber as the backup. But in terms of who everybody top to bottom on the roster and coach staff wants to be the starter and believes the most in the starter, is Derek Carr. But that doesn't mean that you can't have success with Jameis Winston. I think Derek Carr misses at least one game. For the AC sprain information, let's go ahead and jump into this, right? Drew Brees talked about this, and he said that when he had a minor, like a low-grade, grade 1 AC joint, he was ready to go within 1 week. Now, we don't know the grade or severity of Derek Carr's AC. That's not been released, and I've not seen it. Drew Brees said that when he had a minor, low grade, I think it's grade 1. I don't remember if the grade 1 is the highest or the lowest, but the lowest grade, he said that he literally didn't throw a football until the Sunday next that week. And then he was ready to go. So the timetable that you're looking at for this at the absolute lowest is 1 week, which means that in theory, Derek Carr could play against Tampa. The maximum for most of these type of injuries is 6 weeks. I would expect to see Jameis Winston start against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. If nothing else, out of an abundance of caution, you want Derek Carr healthy. And as we just spent the first 20 minutes of the show talking about, you still haven't figured out the offensive line problem. So rushing a Derek Carr who's maybe not 100% back into the gauntlet is probably not the choice that I would go with. So you probably have Jameis Winston for at least 1 week. 2 weeks, if it is minor, as they're saying, you have Derek Carr back. But an AC joint sprain is definitely, as Coach Allen talked about, that is a hell of a good stroke of luck, because that could have been way worse, and that definitely could have been season ending, and it's on his throwing shoulder. So you're going into a team that historically you've been doing really well against recently. I would say that, their defense has been a problem for the Saints, but at the same time, you've been doing really well against their offense, slowing them down. And if you're the Saints, and I know y'all remember this, but we're going to say it, maybe Bucs fans are listening, who knows. But if you're talking about the Saints as a team, they were slowing down this offense for Tampa when Tom Brady was leading. So you have to hope that you have a similar response here. But we shall have to wait and see. We're going to cover that more on Thursday. But last year obviously was a year where Tampa swept. And there's that game that by 1 yard New Orleans should have won. But all that aside, you go before that, we had, 3 straight seasons where we swept Tampa. So very curious to see how it plays out. If you're talking about scoring, though, New Orleans has not allowed Tampa to score more than, or they've not allowed them to score 30 points or more, except for one time in the past 10 games. So we shall see. Do you think they flex the game Sunday to the afternoon? I think it's possible, but I don't know if they're going to do that just yet. Saints already have quite a few primetime games and everything. So we'll kind of hold off on that and wait and see. We'll maybe have a better word by Thursday. But honest to God, I'm more worried about what we're dealing with right now. I'm more worried about this issue with Derek Carr. I'm more worried about the offensive line. But I don't really think they're going to worry about flexing something in week 4, especially, and don't take this offense to any Jameis fans, especially with the backup quarterback starting. Now, some people are going to hear that because, man, there have been so many people sensitive in my social media lately about what I say with Derek Carr and Jameis Winston. I'm not trying to hate on Jameis Winston. I'm just telling you from an NFL perspective. The league, all the league cares about, all the league gives an absolute about is money, okay? Let's be very clear. You're not going to sell better ads, and you're not going to sell more tickets with a backup quarterback. Doesn't matter if his name is Jameis Winston, Trevor Siemian, or, Michael Jordan comes out of freaking retirement. Which, I honestly, that'd probably sell a shit ton of tickets. I'd love to see 60-year-old Michael Jordan suit up to a quarterback. That'd be hilarious. Probably very dangerous, but hilarious. So the league's not going to flex anything when the main quarterback draw that they love to throw up there on the screen is not going to play. So I think that you're going to see the Saints game stay at noon, which I personally would prefer. I'm going to give you my biased reason why I prefer noon games. Here's why. Because I get the all 22 sooner, which means y'all get it sooner. That's why I prefer it. So that's why I prefer it. 992 says Winston was using Michael Thomas well on that last drive. He was. There's a difference between Winston and Carr and their style, but a big chunk of it is design. And Winston has a comfortability. How am I going to word this without people jumping on my ass again? Look, Winston does not progress the field as well as Derek Carr. His pre-snap reads aren't as good. His post-snap reads aren't as good. That doesn't mean there aren't things that he does better. One thing that Jameis Winston has that's better than Derek Carr is his arm. His arm talent is definitely superior to Derek Carr. Winston is the type of quarterback who has favorites and goes for his favorite targets. Carr is the type of quarterback who reads the entire field, but maybe he takes too long to read the field and he holds the ball too long. Both are a problem, right? So y'all can debate over who you prefer more in the comments. I just don't feel like getting into it today. But the reason I bring that up is, yeah, he gets the ball to Michael Thomas more, but a lot of times that can be a problem. One example was on a critical third down in the Packers game, he tried to push a ball to Thomas he shouldn't have when the design of the concept was to get it on a comeback route to Chris Olave. So one thing, if you are Pete Carmichael in the meeting room and game planning, if Winston is going to be the starter, you need to make sure that he understands, hey, I know MT's your favorite guy, but you've got to stick to the concepts here for the most effect. And we'll see how that ends up going out. I mean, you haven't been able to convince him to do that his entire career, but that doesn't mean you stop trying. So you can definitely win this game with Jameis Winston as a quarterback. I don't think that Jameis Winston coming in is the same thing as, Garrett Grayson having to come in to start by any stretch. So we'll just kind of see how that goes. But I think you have to rely on Alvin Kamara, Kendre Miller. I think you're going to have the defense pop back and be stout. And you're definitely going to have some early scoring. So we shall see. Ted says Winston plays sandlot football. I don't know because I feel like that's a little insulting because I do think he's better than that. But I will just point out that Winston is definitely the type of quarterback who tries to win with purely his arm. There are some guys who do that at an elite level. Hell, Mahomes does that at an elite level. But you know what Mahomes also does? Mahomes also is extremely good at reading the field pre-snap and post-snap. So, there are advantages to both of them. But I think in terms of what this offense wants to do, you definitely want Derek Carr back. I'm hoping that you can manage to win with Winston, and he's certainly not going to be a negative at the quarterback compared to some of the other things going around the league. And I said this leading into the season, I'm excited to have Derek Carr as your backup because I do believe that Derek Carr is a starter-capable level quarterback. I'm not going to argue that Jameis Winston is a starter-level quarterback. I'm not going to argue that Jameis is top 10, and there are people out there who do that. But I do think that your position at backup is better than basically every other backup in the league. This is why you have him here still. It's why you wanted him to stay. Now you just got to get the offensive line to be better. This says, why is Pete being used as a jumbo package offensive lineman? They were using that because he's the sixth offensive lineman as the backup. Now, I will say, and I was actually, like I said, I was talking to Nick Underhill earlier. I think it was him who said that. I know I was talking to Ross Jackson as well. But Honors Pete was arguably your best offensive lineman this past week. Take that information for what you will. But Honors Pete was probably your best O-lineman. Yeah, it was actually. I just reread my messages. It was Nick who said that. I was talking to him and we said the same thing. He's definitely capable of being the backup. But you can tell the difference in an Honors Pete and a Landon Young to the massive sack when you had six guys protecting Winston against a four-man rush and you still gave up a sack. Again, this goes also back to, my opinion, coaching. That's a pain in the butt. But anyway, let's continue on. I don't want to get too deep into negativity because there's still positive. If nothing else, man, hang your hat on the fact that the New Orleans Saints are currently 2-1. You have a positive record. I mean, that's got to account for something, right? You started off last year 1-3. You started off last year, go beyond that. You started off 2-5 last year through 7 games. You were 2-1. The New Orleans Saints are playing better this year. You just got to hope that you can work out your problems. I say this every season. Your goal through the first 8 games is to at least be a 500 team, and then you figure your stuff out, you get hot in the second half. Because positionally, you didn't lose any position by that loss against the Green Bay Packers. The only big negative against losing the Packers is you lost to an NFC opponent, and that will matter when you get to the seeding aspect down the road. But we're going to keep moving. I'm going to answer some questions now. I appreciate y'all supporting, and I appreciate y'all being here. Y'all the best fan base here. Paul says, can't see how they fix the offensive line. It's a coaching problem. This line has gotten worse since Marrone has taken over. Paul, we spent the first half of the show talking about that. I agree with you. In terms of how to fix it, there are ways to do it. One thing is going to be in terms of like your slide protections. We just talked about that Landon Young one. You're going to have to change some of the things that you do. And Doug Marrone being around the league and being in this position for literally 3 decades now, he should have the ability to make those type of adjustments. Now, do guys always do that? No. I mean, there's pride that comes into it. There's my way's the better way, et cetera. All these different things can happen. But there are ways to fix it. This offensive line does not have to stay bad. You just actually have to see that actually happen. So we'll continue forward. Billy says, you know my disdain for Pete, but at this point, Pete looked like one of our better linemen. Look, and I've always said, Billy, I've always said that you're a little bit biased just because you can't stand Pete because he stays injured. But healthy Pete is a good Pete. He looked fine. Now, one point I will always give any Andres Pete naysayers is, are you confident Andres Pete plays a 17-game season? And just historically, no, I'm not. But he was healthy. He came in, and I shudder to think what it would have looked like if you would have had to have like Max Garcia in there at guard instead of Andres Pete. So I'm thankful that you had some of that depth when an injury came in the form of a concussion. I will also go ahead and say openly that I really hope that, Ruiz comes through healthy this week. And then the conversation becomes, do you start Andres Pete at left guard? I know I'm starting a controversy here. And I said, and let me just first open it up. I think I might have been wrong. I was very adamant that I wanted Hurst to be the starting left guard because I felt it helped Trevor Penning. Well, this past week, Trevor Penning and the left side with Andres Pete looked a hell of a lot better than 2 weeks of Hurst and Penning. I could have been very wrong, y'all. And I tell y'all all the time, you can't make, a complete assertion off one game. But Andres Pete looked good. I mean, there's a reason that 2 people who have made a career, well, Nick definitely making a much better career, out of film analysts say, yeah, Andres Pete was the best offensive lineman. So, yeah. The Rook says Hurst is a better tackle. See, I disagree with that strongly because Hurst was your starting tackle last year, and he was terrible. He was the worst offensive lineman on the team. He gave up more sacks than anybody on the team, gave up more pressures than anybody on the team. He was a serviceable journeyman, but very clearly like, yeah, we want to replace this guy, which is why he was replaced. I don't think that he's a good tackle. But I guess if your argument is you just believe he's a better backup tackle than a backup guard, that's also fine. I think what New Orleans has, though, is a position of need along the offensive line and a couple positions. Nick, good to see you. At what point do you change at O-line coach? Great question, Nikki. I honest to God don't have an answer. I don't know when you change. As of right now, if you know for a fact it's on Doug Marrone, very quickly, you make some type of change. Maybe you don't fire Marrone, but you say, hey, you better let somebody else get some input here, right? 3 games is very early. I mean, there's several things to keep in mind here. You're talking about being a winning team, you got a winning record, you're 3 weeks into a season, and you've had a guy who's basically in his rookie campaign. There are growing pains, but I definitely think that Doug Marrone is a problem as of right now. As of right now, I think that he is a problem. And the other aspect of that, Nikki, goes into who do you replace him with? If you want to replace Doug Marrone, who's available that you replace him with? And I'm a guy who loves O-line, D-line. I know a lot of these coaches and stuff. Like, I've gotten to study a lot of them. Ain't exactly just O-line coaches growing on trees. We can go up and grab a good one. The only realistic option I think you can do if you're the New Orleans Saints is to take a shot with Jari Evans and say, hey, look, make it happen, Captain. Make it happen. And go from there. And we'll just kind of see how that goes. But there are ways to fix it with scheme calls, protection calls, changing some of the things you're doing. But no matter what, they've got to do something. They certainly can't just sit on their hands and go, we hope it gets better. 985 says Hurst is awful at every position. It's like a pressure every play from him. Plus, he's weak DT just pushed him out the way. I'm not going to go that drastic 985J. I don't think it's that bad, but I do think that he is a technician veteran. He is not a high-end athlete. He's not a high-end player. He's going to win because he's technically sound, but he's not. He doesn't have elite play strength. He doesn't do a lot in terms of driving and moving off the ball, but he's still a competent guy. I mean, he's, if you play Madden right now, I know they have this with quarterbacks, but he's a bridge player. He's a bridge player. He is good enough to start, but he's not good enough for you to want to invest in long term. He's not your answer, but he's the guy that you put there while you find an answer. New Orleans trying to find an answer. Is Duke Manyweather free? Billy, Duke has been very clear that he does not want to coach in terms of in the NFL. And he said because he wants to be able to do things his way and he wants to be able to train his way. Keep in mind that Duke has been winning awards. He's on committees. He helps choose the best offensive line in college football every year. The dude don't need to do it if he don't want to. And he works currently with hundreds of offensive linemen across the league. So while I personally would love that, that dude's already said, no, thank you. Yeah, I mean, so that kind of is what it is. You know, do we need to look at how we draft offensive talent? I really don't think so, Gundam. I mean, I really don't. I mean, we might need to look at how much we value certain things, but I don't think that the players the New Orleans Saints are drafting are bad players. I don't think Trevor Penning's a bad player. Do I disagree with the valuation of him being a mid-first round pick? I absolutely do. I absolutely do. But do I think that he's a subpar talent? No, I don't. I actually think that he's really, has the potential to be great. I mean, truly, I think he has the potential to be great. It's just going to take development to get out there. And honestly, if Dan Rauschar was still here, I might have more confidence in that development being quicker. But I'm not mad at that. I definitely am not mad at the Olave pick. I'm not mad at the Ruiz or Eric McCoy. I think some guys just need development. And maybe we can argue their valuation is too high on some of these guys. But, I don't honestly have an issue with it. I think that they're doing better than most teams when it comes to the draft process, especially in the first 3 rounds. Reginald says Peyton called plays to our strengths and covered our weaknesses. We need more quick passes. We got to get the ball out quickly. I do agree with that, Reginald. But this also, I'm going to bring up another point. I said this after the post game, and I even mentioned it in the film study yesterday. You've got veteran wide receivers running on top of each other. Like, that was a problem in the fourth quarter where you had Juwan Johnson, Chris Olave, and Michael Thomas all right next to each other. Multiple plays. So you're right that they need to do that. But let's say that you want to run a Hank concept or something like that. Well, if they're not running it correctly, it doesn't matter if you're running that as a quick pass design. You run you a slant flat or run you a corner flat, a little 2-route concept on a half field. I mean, but if the guys don't have their spacing down, they don't have their timing down. It really doesn't matter if you call that play. So I'll also have that I got to point out as a concern. Again, 3 weeks in, you're going to have things like this. That's understandable. I'm not going to freak out about it. But, I mean, come on. You've got to make sure that gets fixed. And this goes back to, it doesn't matter if you have Carr or Winston on the field. You got to have your team playing well. And the reason the team has to have all their stuff bolted down is because you don't have a Hall of Fame quarterback. And these are the type of little things that you don't notice as much when you have Drew Brees, right? You can get away with your offensive line maybe not being perfect because you got Drew Brees. You can get away with your offensive receivers not being great or elite or maybe running their routes kind of sloppy, because you got Drew Brees. Well, you don't have that anymore. Welcome back to the days of the rest of the NFL, where now everybody has to be good because you don't have great anymore. And we'll just keep seeing where that goes from. I mean, I do like some of the progression. Pete Carmichael's definitely called a better season this year than he did last year. So give him credit for that. He still isn't, he's not Shanahan. He's not Sean Payton, but he's definitely doing better this year than he was doing last year. So that's something, right? I like that for him. I hope it continues to become better. But New Orleans is simply at where most teams in the NFL stay. You got to figure out a way to be elite or in other ways than the quarterback way, because you just don't have that option right now. Mike says, love Chris, but I'm afraid he's turning into Julio, who gets all these yards but no TDs. The thing with Chris Olave is you don't expect him to be a high TD guy. Like, no offense to Chris Olave. Chris Olave is not a guy you expect to be a high TD guy unless you start designing the playbook similar to how Miami uses Tyreek Hill. You're hoping to get him in, yards after catch situations and 7 through 9 routes. Chris Olave is not the body that dominates inside at the pylon. I will say that he still does pretty well there. Give you an example. I mean, he got hit in the chest by Derek Carr. Should have probably caught the ball in a pass that I still believe that Derek Carr should have sent to Michael Thomas. But, yeah, I mean, I don't know if I've ever seen Chris Olave as a guy that I expect to get 10, 15 touchdowns in a season. Because he's 6 foot, 185. He's a smaller, faster, shiftier guy, and most of those guys aren't getting crazy touchdown numbers, but they're still helping you win the football game. Now, Tyreek Hill is an anomaly. And keep in mind that Tyreek Hill has only got 2 seasons in his career where he's had 10 or more TDs. And Tyreek Hill's been playing now for 8 years. Now, Tyreek Hill is still arguably one of the best receivers in the NFL. I don't really think there's much to argue there, but there's always somebody out there. He's only got 2 seasons in his entire career where he had 10 or more TDs. Last year, Chris Olave had 4. I see Chris Olave as a 6 to 8 TD a year guy. He could be more. It really just comes down to usage. But you look at when you did score a touchdown in Green Bay, who'd you score it with? Exactly what we wanted them to do. They used the big body guys like Jimmy Graham to score in the red zone. Exactly what you hoped for, right? So that means that you're going to limit attempts to Chris Olave. You're just not going to have as many shots. Peyton says Michael Thomas needs to be used more as a deep threat sometimes. He has amazing hands and come down with almost anything. One thing about that, Peyton, is Michael Thomas is not amazing at high pointing the ball in the traditional sense that you would have a deep shot guy. Now, they do use him in the intermediate routes pretty heavily, and the play where Derek Carr got hurt was actually a great Michael Thomas play, 20 yards in terms of a crossing pattern, and had the offensive line not turned into a freaking sieve and look like one of those, mesh trash cans that you're trying to put water in, you would have had a massive Michael Thomas play deep. So they're calling the plays. There are opportunities, but you need the offensive line to hold up, right? And when you got a freaking laundry basket you're trying to fill water with the offensive line, you're going to struggle to complete those concepts. And that's why when you talked about what Jameis Winston did well earlier, he was getting the ball quickly to Michael Thomas because Michael Thomas' favorite target. Those passes were going for like 5 or 7 yards. And then Thomas did a couple of good plays to extend some of those, some decent moving up the field, including one that went for 22 yards. But when you go after Michael Thomas, you're taking advantage of his hands. You're not trying to turn him into a speed deep threat. You're really not trying to have him be the guy when you do call the Yankee concept, he's the one running the post with a 15-yard break. You're just not asking him to do that. Can he do it? Sure. But if you really want to take advantage of him, you have him be the in cut underneath in that 10-yard break, maybe a 12-yard break, and then hit him in the middle of the field, right? That's what he does really well. And so far this year, hey, fun fact, Michael Thomas is currently 5 yards away from passing last year's reception total. So shout out to him, man. Shout out to him. He's averaging, 55-ish yards a game? 55-ish yards a game? If we pull up our handy-dandy calculator, because I don't feel like doing that math times 17, but if he plays 17 games, which I hope he does, that means he's going to end up with over 900 yards receiving. That is a huge freaking W. Huge freaking W. I just need to see him get in the end zone. He had 3 of those last year. Hopefully we return to that this year. So how can we do better on early downs? I would say predictability is a little bit. I know I've been giving Pete Carmichael praise, but there is a little bit of predictability with run, then pass, run, then pass, run, then pass, run, then pass pretty consistently. I think they need to switch some things up situationally. But I'd also argue that the Saints offense has been significantly better this year compared to last year in most of those marks. Again, I'm not trying to word it as I think Pete Carmichael has turned the leaf. He's suddenly amazing. But I do think that offensively, most of your problems are not that bad. So, for example, let me read off some offensive splits for you, okay? So right now, in the first quarter and the third quarter, all right, so in the first quarter right now, the Saints are averaging 4 yards per carry when they run the ball. In the third quarter, they're averaging 5.5 yards per carry. In the fourth quarter, they're averaging 6 yards per carry. Now, the negative is they're not actually getting to run as much in the second half because they've had some struggles. But that's good. But let's actually talk about it by when plays happen, right? On 1st and 10, the New Orleans Saints are averaging 4.6 yards per carry. That's pretty damn good, right? That's success early on. Now, let me give you a negative real quick. On 1st down, the New Orleans Saints have given up 2 sacks on 1st and 10. And on 1st and greater than 10, like 1st and 15, they've given up another sack. So they've given up 3 sacks on 1st and 10 and longer. That's a problem. That's a problem. So I actually think that a lot of the play calling is better situationally, but there are definitely ways to improve, y'all. I never want to make it sound like I'm putting up Pete Carmichael in the same breath as the Shanahans, the McVays, the Paytons, because I'm not. But I do think that we've seen movement in the right direction. And the only time that I really got onto him in terms of what I felt like was regressing into bad habits was when you had Jameis Winston come in, and it felt like the offense he was calling was completely changed. And I think that he left the run really quickly. He started getting scared. I call it scared or whatever, kind of freaked out and went back to, well, 3 straight passes and we're going to make it happen. And it doesn't work. It doesn't work very well. So I think he's had a really good job when the Saints were doing well, when Derek Carr was there, at calling some of the plays. Sure, there are definitely opportunities to do things better. And I will just go ahead and say, I'm not an NFL coach, man. I know a lot about football. I'm blessed to have gotten to work in the field and know some things. But I can't tell you that I could call a better game than Pete Carmichael. And all I can do is judge him based on what we've seen. So that is something I will continue to do. I'll call him out when I see him doing good, call him out when I see him doing bad. Antonio says, did you see Graham catch a TD pass? It's almost like he's 6'7" and used to play basketball. Weird. Feels like we have 2 6'6" tall basketball players. I did see that Jimmy Graham catch, and that made me so excited for not only Jimmy Graham but the Saints, because that was a red zone TD, and I get so tired of people talking about, oh, the Saints can't score in the red zone. They're trash. Like, well, first of all, that was a problem before Derek Carr got here, and I don't think Derek Carr has contributed to the problem. I think he's helped, even though Derek Carr has missed some opportunities. But that made me so happy to see that. It really did. By the way, some more little stats for y'all. When the Saints face a blitz, they've given up 6 sacks. When the Saints face a normal rush, they've given up 6 sacks. They're just struggling, period. They are just struggling, period. 10 of the sacks that they've given up have come in the shotgun. That is actually what is the most amazing to me, because the shotgun is designed to give a quarterback a natural advantage. The quarterback, a shotgun is typically going to be a 3-step drop depth, right? So you're already giving them the depth they would have if they were under center, falling back into their drop back. They have a scan of the field, and it's a little bit easier to direct where you want your blocking to go and come from. And the fact that 10 of their sacks have come in the shotgun is mind-blowing to me. This offensive line has got to get better. Doug Marrone has got to do better. Gosh, that blows my mind. That really does. That's just like, sweet baby Jesus. The O-line coach needs to be gone now. We can't afford to keep letting him ruin our season with horrible coaching. I'm very curious to see what the New Orleans Saints do with Doug Marrone. I'm not trying to cost people their job because I know that these are real people, but I would say that this offensive line has certainly had better coaching in recent years. Certainly. Paul says, what has happened to Ram? He got destroyed the whole game. Great film breakdown. Glad you enjoyed it, Paul. I think it just comes down to a few different things. I think there's individual plays he's losing. I don't like the coaching that's currently going on with the offensive line. I think there's several problems in New Orleans right now, and it's not just a Ram problem. It is a New Orleans Saints problem, and that means that is on DA to fix. And even though I spent most of this episode calling out Doug Marrone, I'll be very clear. The person that this falls on is Dennis Allen. There's 2 reasons it falls on Dennis Allen. Number 1, it falls on Dennis Allen because Dennis Allen's the head coach. So everything good and everything bad is on Dennis Allen. And number 2, Dennis Allen hired this man because they've worked together before, and this is one of those cases of the guy is hiring your guys. You know, you go in, you replace people, kind of like what Sean Payton's doing up there in Denver, like a complete idiot. I'm going to bring in my guys. No, bring in the best. Doug Marrone's one of Dennis Allen's guys. There's 2 reasons why it's on DA to fix this. 1, you're the head coach and it's your damn job. 2, you brought your boy in, and your boy looking like complete cheeks right now. Fix it. I don't care if you clip it and send it to their house. Just being honest. Because I have no problem with you bringing in your friends. I really don't. If your friends are good, right? If your friends are good, bring in whoever you want to. In the year of our Lord 2023, I do not think Doug Marrone is good. I wasn't confident in him last year. I think he was okay, but I wasn't really confident. I liked his experience. If I had to give Doug Marrone a positive, he has a crap ton of experience, and experience does matter, right? But here's what I think Doug Marrone would be better at. For those that don't know much about Doug Marrone, he is a former player. Doug Marrone's been in the league a long time. He's been an offensive line guy basically his entire career. He worked his way up from an offensive line coach at Georgia Tech and then to the New York Giants and eventually became a head coach at Syracuse and then the head coach of the Buffalo Bills. What I think Doug Marrone is at this point in his career, Doug Marrone is probably a better coach, as in like a better leader of men, than a teacher to teach you how to make this offensive line better. And he's better at being a coach than he is scheming. He's better at being a coach of a group than he is teaching how this offensive line can be better play in and play out. Now, that's just me pulling complete conjecture out of my and I am just speaking my mind. But I don't think Doug Marrone's got it anymore because he was the head coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars. And now he went to Alabama. And he's 60 years old. And I don't think he's contributing much to this team in a positive way. And I really do not give a flip if somebody brings in their friends. A great example is you look over. Let's just keep making fun of Sean Payton because it's a thing to do right now. It helps us, get rid of some of this frustration and vent some of this. Well, we're all laughing at him because he brought in Adam Trautman, right? Well, Adam Trautman's got 5 catches for 34 yards. That is not exactly blowing it up. But he also brought in Lil Jordan Humphrey, who's already scored a touchdown this year. So, hey, shout out to Lil Jordan Humphrey for still being in the league, right? Shout out to Lil Jordan Humphrey. The man's still in the league and apparently still scoring touchdowns. And he was with New England last year. So, be very clear. Very clear. It's not like LJ was just not on a team and he got a phone call. Will Lutz, people were ragging him. Oh, he missed an extra point. Well, Will Lutz certainly didn't miss last week when our rookie missed a game-winning field goal. And by the way, all the doom and gloom that we've been having the past 48 hours of Saints fans lamenting how terrible this team is, they literally were a field goal away from winning, and they had driven the field and had the field goal, and rookie kicker Blake Grupe doinked it. Didn't even doink it. I mean, just straight shanked it. So, oh, man. What a time to be alive. I do want to post real quick just because I am rooting for Will Lutz to be better. I really am. So y'all can judge me. I don't care. I am rooting for Will Lutz to be better. Will Lutz currently, through 3 weeks, has a better completion percentage as a field goal guy. Like his kick percentage is now the highest it's been since 2019. So shout out to him. Shout out to him. What do you think of Headley? I think Lou Headley was a mistake. I think the 30-year-old Aussie is a fantastic story. That's about it. Maybe he gets better. I know that he's not been kicking very long, but the man is 30. The man is my age. And do you know, look, I'm going to do this before we wrap up. Blake Gillikin, I realized did not have as good of a year last year. And I will admit that. His first year with the team was better. Last year was not. But let me give you some numbers. How about that? Y'all want numbers? Everybody loves numbers, right? Numbers are easy to understand. Last year, 41.6% of Blake Gillikin's punts ended up inside the opponent's 20, right? That's good. Now, most people, you know what? I'm not even get to that point. 41.6% of his punts ended in the opponent's 20s. So that's good, right? We like that. That's good. That means most of the punts are pinning them deep. Even if it's not perfect, it's pinning them. Lou Headley, through 3 games, 29% of his punts are inside the 20. Now, your response might be, oh, well, Blake had it easier because he was punting from shorter fields. Okay, well, let me tell you that Lou Headley is currently kicking 43.8 yards per punt, including some shanks. Blake Gillikin last year was 46.4 yards per punt, so 3 to 4 yards more per punt. Okay? Let's take it even deeper. Punters can boom the kicks, right? They make some complete, just, it's impressive. Some of these guys can make the ball go 60 yards. Did you know, in terms of the longest punt each punter has had this season, Lou Headley has the shortest one. What I mean by that is, if we're taking the longest punt from every punter in the NFL this year so far, who's had the shortest punt in terms of the longest? Lou Headley. Everybody else's long is longer than Headley. So y'all can just do that little word math in your head. And then my final point. This is the one that gets me. Even if Blake Gillikin had a down year last year, Blake Gillikin is 5 years younger. I don't see the allure to Lou Headley unless you just really find him very attractive with all those tattoos and the ripped stomach, and the man looks like he could be a model for, you know, a modern Tommy Hilfiger brand. But I don't think he's a good punter. And I'm getting sick of watching him punt the ball 25, 30 yards out the sideline. The man needs to get the stuff together. Get your together. No hang time, no leg. He can do good directional punting. So I'll give him credit on that. He has good directional punting. But unless you plan on bringing in 2 punters at one time and let Blake Gillikin boom it when you need a long one and letting Headley pin him inside the 15 when you need a directional punt, that dude better get his stuff together quick, because I'm getting very quickly annoyed. Anyway, that's where I currently am. And I hope he gets better, to be very clear. I do hope the man gets better. But when less than 30% of your punts are ending up inside the 20, we got a problem. We got a problem. The opponent should not be starting their field position at their 35 and their 40 like Green Bay was doing. Has Blake Gillikin been picked up? Nope, Blake Gillikin is ready and waiting right now. I'm not his agent. I don't work for him. This is not me secretly trying to get that man a job. But Blake Gillikin is a free agent. He does not have a job right now. So, yeah, give that man a call. We're going to wrap up for the day. I hope y'all enjoyed the show. As always, I greatly appreciate y'all. If you haven't, join the Discord and follow me on Twitter. I need to know who you want to see in the Saints. Ow, son of a biscuit. I just beat the tar out of my hand and the desk. If you want to tell me who you want for the next film study, you better get it in now. I do appreciate every single one of you. Thank you for being the most amazing community there is. If you want to help out the channel, you want more film studies, stuff like that, check out the RevDeuce.com website. That's where you can pick up some of our merch, get you a t-shirt, get you a hat, get you a mug. Every little bit helps. The more that y'all support the channel, the more I can do. So before you bugger off, go follow me on Twitter at RevDeuceWyndham. Go join the Discord so that you can provide feedback ASAP Rocky if you want to get certain film done, and then check out the website if you want to pick up some merch. And finally, last but not least, completely optional, if you do want to support the show financially, again, content creators like me can't do what we do without tips. PayPal, Venmo, Cash App. And everybody's like, oh, he's just pandering and shilling. You're damn right I am, because I got 3 kids to feed, and this stuff is a lot of work. So I love y'all. Appreciate y'all. Who dat? God bless. I'll catch y'all all tomorrow on the film study, whatever it is that y'all choose for me to do. Thank you, and I'm outie.